Uh, so what were some things you remembered about your childhood, moving to different places, growing up? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the first house I lived in was a parsonage, and the preacher who was the preacher at the church next to the parsonage had his own home, so my father moved into that parsonage. And there was a mail carrier who kept a big leather bag on his shoulder, and when he would deliver mail to my house, he would put me in that bag and carry me around for about two or three houses, and then he'd walk me back to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very exciting. I thought that was just the best thing in the world. Um, I remember playing in our backyard. We had a big, tall wooden fence, and my sister and I used to go out there and play, and my parents felt we were just very safe, but mainly safe from dogs that were allowed to just roam loose. And there was a rabid dog in the street right in front of my house. And my father called my sister and me in. He didn't want us out there, and he took his rifle and went upstairs and pointed out a window upstairs and killed that rabid dog. Back then, they would usually take, if they did not know the dog was rabid, was not having any kind of fit, then they would take that dog to, well, it was usually sent to the capital of the state, and they would decapitate the dog, and in some way they examined it just to find out if he was rabid. And the reason I know they did that is because I was bitten by a dog once, and the people who owned the dog took a trip to Europe and took the dog with them. So we never knew whether the dog was rabid. But I had the 21 rabies shots, one a day for 3 weeks, and that was punishment enough, I thought.
Uh, yeah. Okay. So, what was life during the war like?
Oh my goodness. I can remember, the first I remember is when President Roosevelt would speak to the public over the radio. There was no television back then. And everybody would gather around their radios like we do around our TVs and listen to his speech. And it was once a week, or if there was any kind of an emergency and he needed to let the public know, then he would get on the radio then. But it was always about the war. At that particular time, that was 1939 and 40, that's when Roosevelt declared that we would go to war.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not going to do that. Then he finally did, because they had submarines and ships on the coast of the United States around. So it was time to do something. And this was the war with Germany.
Right.
Later with Japan, because they blew up ships at Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And I can recall the times that the school would ask us, all the children, as they walked to school, because most of the children lived within walking distance of the school. The teachers asked us if we saw anything on the curb or out in the street. There were very few cars, so we didn't really have to worry. But we were to pick up any kind of metal, a screw or bolt, a nail, anything, and put it in a bag and bring it to school. And we collected metal back then, and it was sent off for them to use to melt down and build airplanes and tanks,
Wow.
trucks, jeeps.
Mhm. So did y'all have any cars, and if y'all did, with gas? I know that
Oh,
we
gas
rationed a lot.
It was everything was rationed, including food, shoes. You could only have 2 pairs of shoes a year, and food. There were certain things you could only get a certain amount of it, and you had to have coupons.
Right.
And if you didn't have the coupon, you could have millions of dollars, but it wouldn't buy a pound of sugar unless you had the coupon to give as well.
Right. And for gas?
Gas, I was kind of small, so I really wasn't aware of it being really high or scarce or anything. But my father bought himself a bicycle, and he would ride his bike instead of the car. So it must have had something to do with the price of gas or the